Hello and welcome to this episode of Kennedy Saves the World. I did it! I did my 10th half Ironman on Sunday, and it was a completely different experience than anything I had done before in a race, and I wanted to share it with you because it took me a little bit to process how the race went for me, because I have to tell you, when you do a race that's a longer distance, you never quite know how the entire thing is going to go. So you can have an estimate of where you think you're going to finish. Like when I ran the New York City Marathon in 2013, I thought I was going to finish at 4.5 hours. I finished at 4:43 because I'm not a fast runner. I've never been a fast runner. It almost doesn't matter what I do to train. I just run slow. And I have come to accept that. And this was the race where I really embraced it and actually had a much better time. So in the past, because I have been doing triathlon since 1995, many of those years I wanted to race as fast as possible to either get on the podium in smaller races or qualify for nationals at a much shorter distance. And I was able to do those things here and there. But then once I had kids and started doing longer distances, I have to tell you, people who do the Ironman distance and half Ironman, they are crazy. And I think all they do is train, because I looked at women in my age group and how fast they're doing this race, and it is unfathomable to me. Like maybe there are women in the 50 to 54 age group who are almost pro because they are finishing not too far out of the realm of professional women, like maybe a half hour, 45 minutes outside of the pro women, which is insane to me because they were racing against women 20 years their junior. So I have given up my podium dreams at the half Ironman distance. So when you are spending, 10, 12 hours a week training, you really have to ask yourself, why am I doing this? So for the race that I just did in Italy, in Emilia-Romagna, a part of Italy that I had never been to before, that has wild flamingos all over the place. I've been to Italy probably 10 times, and I've seen pretty much everything but Sicily. And I'd never seen this part. It's about 2 hours south of Venice, 2.5 hours drive. We flew into Venice, so my bike didn't have to change planes because with the help of a very nice mechanic, I packed it into a bag for the first time. Normally with the team in training, the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, they ship your bike for you and you don't have to worry about it. So this is the first time I worried about it. Took one nonstop flight to Italy, but about a month ago. So over the spring and summer, I had been plagued with chronic bronchitis. I had bronchitis 4 different times. And also, every couple years, I get a flare-up of either Epstein-Barr or long COVID, but I get a fatigue flare-up where it's almost impossible to train. So between all of those things, I wasn't really able to do the kind of training that you have to in order to complete a race of this length. And so about a month ago, I was talking to my sexy teenage boyfriend, and, we'd agreed, like, maybe I just defer and I do it next year. And I went on the website and I was ready to cancel this race and defer it until next year and just do the whole trip again. And I couldn't do it. There was something inside of me that I really, really wanted to do this race, but I only had about 3 weeks to actually train at the level I wanted to. And, it's like, I'm 52. You can't kill yourself in training. You have to be very smart about what your body is capable of doing and finding that balance of pushing yourself without injuring yourself, because as you age, it's a lot easier to injure yourself if you have had repetitive stress injuries and if you've been doing one sport for almost 30 years like I have with triathlon. This was also my first half Ironman back since I tore my hip labrum in 2022 and had surgery for that and was pretty much out of training for about 6 months. I did one Olympic distance race last year. So this is my first half Ironman back, and I have been nervous about it for weeks. And I knew I was going to be because you might have heard I interviewed my coach, Leanda Cave, a couple weeks ago on the podcast. She was a 2012 Kona Ironman world champion. She is a phenomenal coach and an incredible athlete who understands this sport inside and out better than anyone I've ever talked to. And, as we spoke about, she honors every single athlete. So, if you are a civilian triathlete like me, she's not going to try to get me running a 7.5-minute mile, but she does help me more than anything with the psychological aspect and the nerves that I get when I race. So got to Italy a few days early, decided to do the race, really pushed the last 3 weeks of training, had a proper taper week where I didn't blow anything out. I obviously do a lot more body work now than I did 10 or 20 years ago with really experienced physiotherapists who know exactly what they're doing and what to target and how to get you over some of the bumps that could lead to injury and help get you better and back on track. So with all of those things in mind, went to Italy, acclimated for a few days, found gluten-free food, slept a ton somehow, but I still had all the butterflies on the swim. And, of course it goes swim, bike, run. Half Ironman, it's a 1.2 mile ocean swim. We were in the Adriatic, a 56-mile bike, which they said was flat, which was a lie, and a 13.1 mile run. So you have a half marathon at the end of a half Ironman. And the day before was a full Ironman. So, we went to the finish line and watched some of the people finish, the race in 10 hours. And these athletes are in phenomenal shape. They're, still a couple hours behind the winners, but it was really fun seeing people compete in a race and finish that quickly with that much left in the tank. And I was talking to a couple of guys. We were getting some food afterward, and there were a couple of Irish guys who travel all over the world doing triathlon, and they finished a full Ironman in 9:20, which is insane to me. And so I asked them, I've done 10 half Ironman races. Should I try and do a full? And they said, absolutely. And I said, okay, so next year, if I like this race tomorrow, this half Ironman, for which I'm very nervous, and the butterflies, almost did a better job of carrying me to Italy than an actual plane. And one of the guys said, no frickin' way. This race is so much harder than they advertise. The hill on the bike is going to kill you. And I was like, oh, fantastic. Now I have so much to look forward to. But so they said, yes, absolutely do a full Ironman at some point. I still don't think I'm going to. I like the half Ironman distance in moderation. But the next day I got up, terrified for the swim, got out there and used a totally different technique than I had ever used before. And I listened to something that Katie Ledecky said when she was racing in the Olympics, and she is unbeatable at 1,500 meters. That's a really long swim for a competitive racer. And she said the key with those longer swims is to not get in your own head, because once you get in your own head, you get consumed by negative thoughts. That has happened to me on so many swims, and it really slows me down. So I was swimming totally divorced from how I was training. So this time I just got positive mantras in my head and repeated them over and over again and did it in rhythm to my stroke. So I was like, I had 3 sessions of body work. I had plenty of sleep last night. I'm going to swim with the pack. And then Kyle, my swim coach, always tells me on the catch to move the dog. That's how you move yourself through the water. You move the dog. And I was like, I am going to move the dog. And I did it. And I had the fastest swim time I've ever had in a half Ironman. And you're like, oh my God, did you PR? Not by a mile. And I'll tell you why. It was because of my hip. The last half Ironman I did, I tore my hip during the race. I was fine on the bike. As soon as I got on the run, I knew it was torn. I was in agonizing pain. I still ran a half marathon on a torn hip because I was like, it's already torn. So this time I didn't want to get myself into trouble. So I talked with my coach, Leanda, and she said, go conservatively on the bike. Go easier than you think you want to, even if your time is slower. And I saw that my time was about 2 miles per hour slower than I thought I was capable of doing. But I'm like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to hold myself back. And then, of course, the massive hill comes. It was the second biggest hill I have ever seen in a race. This is only the second time in a race that I have seen people off their bikes walking up a hill. The only other time was Oceanside in California, where the hill is on a Marine base. It's a Camp Pendleton. So you can't even get in a car and drive the course to see what you're up against. Really, the only time you see it is when you're actually racing, and people were completely bombarded by pain in that race. A lot of people were walking. I didn't walk. I didn't walk in this race. I went back to the positive mantra, like, I am on my bike, spin, spin, spin. I am trained, I'm gonna go. Was I slow? Yes, I was slow. I was very slow on the hill. Did I have a fast bike time? No, I did not, but it was fine. Did I save enough for the run? I don't know, because I didn't look at my watch the entire run, and that's what I did differently in this race. Now, normally, in the past, when I was trying to PR, I would be chained to my watch, and I would be so worried and obsessed with my time that I wouldn't pay attention to my body. And then in the case of the race in Atlantic City, where I tore my hip, I didn't even enjoy it because I was so worried about the time that I wasn't even focused on the pain, which, at some point you have to take care of yourself, and you have to take care of your body, and you have to check in constantly. So on the run, I went completely by feel, and I ran that entire half marathon slow as molasses in January, but I didn't care because I was steady. I found a rhythm and a pace that I knew I could maintain. I was moving my feet faster. I was moving my arms. I did everything I was doing in training. It just turns out a little bit slower. And I had essentially the exact same run time as if I had been pushing myself, looking at my watch, and grinding. And the negativity of realizing I wasn't at the pace I wanted to be at would have made me so sad. And what is the point of racing? What is the point of being out on a course between 6 and 7 hours for me if you're going to be sad? I talked to a good friend of mine, and he said that he had watched a Netflix documentary about the Chinese ski jumping team called Hatching Eagles, and the coach for that team said that when you are competing, get out of your head and find the joy. And that's what my friend Mark said to me. He said, find the joy. And that's what I did on the run. And you know how I did that? I was not chained to my watch. I was not looking at the pace. I went by feel. I pushed myself as much as I possibly could. I kept my cadence up. I kept my arms swinging. But most importantly, I kept my head up and I was smiling. And I have to tell you, if you ever have the desire to race in Italy, whether it's a 10K or a full marathon, a full Ironman, whatever the case may be, those crowds were the most wonderful and positive and funny and kind I think I have ever experienced. So the joy that I felt, and I did not walk, I did not pull back, I did not try to find an easier gear. My point was to be as steady as possible and enjoy it. And in the end, I was absolutely gassed. But I did the very best that I could, and I found a rhythm inside of me, and I found the joy, which led to the intuition, which for me was an absolute victory. Did I win the race? Oh, yeah. I crushed it in less than 4 hours. No! I almost came in at 7 hours, but I was still under 7 hours, which is really my threshold, and I was delighted. Am I going to go back and do another half Ironman in December? No, I'm going to take 3 months off and swim and do Pilates and yoga. And I'm going to have fun with my fitness. And then I'll get back and reassess in January and find a race next year where I'm going to take the elements that went well for me and I'm going to replicate them again. Because that's where I am, and I'm going to race with joy and mindfulness, and I hope next time you compete, you do as well. This has been Kennedy Saves the World. I'm Kennedy. Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.
Oh, go ahead and leave me a review while you're there. I'd love to hear what you have to say. You've been listening to Kennedy Saves the World on the Fox News Podcast Network.